Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our armchair conversation titled Charting the Next Chapter for Displaced Ukrainians, that will be moderated by Sedef, Deputy Director General and Director Migration Dialogues and Cooperation. Sedef, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Justina. Can I ask everyone to take a seat, please? And can we close the doors? Thank you. So, welcome to this armchair conversation that looks at Ukraine's and EU's response to displacement from Ukraine, and of course also preparations for a long-term recovery in Ukraine. For the last 3.5 years, Russia's aggression against Ukraine has continued with still no end in sight, and as we all know, this has led to many loss of lives, destruction, destroyed homes, and of course also displacement at huge levels. Since the beginning of the war, ICMPD has sought to contribute to support partners in Ukraine, but also EU member states on policy and also at the operational level. ICMPD has supported, as many of you may know, temporary displaced persons from Ukraine through its Ukrainian consultation centers placed in 3 member states of the EU, Germany, Poland, and the Czech Republic, those countries that are hosting the largest numbers of displacement from Ukraine in the European Union. So our discussion today aims to have a look at exploring durable solutions, including sustainable pathways for return to Ukraine, but also for recovery in Ukraine, as well as sustainable solutions for the beneficiaries of temporary protection remaining in the EU. And for that conversation, I'm very delighted that to have 2 guests with me, very, very relevant guests. Ylva Johansson, first and foremost, EU Special Envoy for Ukrainians in the EU at the European Commission. Very pleased to have you, Ms. Johansson. And Mariana Betsa, yes, I see you on the screen, Deputy Minister of Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ukraine, joining us today online. Also very pleased that you are with us here. Thank you once again. The format of this session will include first an introductory exchange with Ms. Johansson, followed by a conversation with Ms. Betsa, and then once again a concluding exchange with Ms. Johansson on the next steps and EU priorities. But to kickstart the discussion, I would first of all like to ask you, Ms. Johansson, you have been appointed as a Special Envoy for Ukrainians in the EU earlier this year, so I'd be interested to know, of course, what that role means, if you would like to explain about that. But at the same time, as your appointment, more or less at the same time, the Council adopted a recommendation, the prolongation of temporary protection for Ukrainian citizens until March 2027. And also a few months later, a Council recommendation was adopted on the transition away from temporary protection for displaced persons from Ukraine in September this year. So I would also immediately like to ask, in relation, apart from your role, how do you consider the recommendation sufficient for member states to get prepared for when temporary protection ends eventually? The recommendations, as we know, in the Council recommendation also give quite a broad leeway to member states, broadly referring to what is already regulated in the Temporary Protection Directive. So do you see this enough for a concerted approach among member states, or do you think there may be some patchwork solutions differing among member states? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for being here. And as the war that the Ukrainians are fighting is really an existential one for Ukraine, of course, but also for us. And I'm very pleased that I had this opportunity to continue after being a commissioner for Home Affairs. Now I can continue to contribute for the Ukrainians. So my role as Special Envoy is, you can say, to be like a political mediator, to try to solve the situation when the temporary protection will end. And what I think we need to do is to transfer our narrative or our way of thinking out from protection and refugees. We know that bombs are still falling, so protection is still needed. But I think it's time to shift more to a discussion about displaced persons or diaspora and the future of Ukraine, the investments in Ukraine, the construction of Ukraine, and the future path for Ukraine into the European Union. I think this is where we need to come. So the transition out of the temporary protection should be, of course, into a national residence permit in the member states where the Ukrainians are staying. But at the same time, it's actually very important that we help the Ukrainians to keep in good contact with Ukraine, because Ukraine is going to need a lot of people back. And even if they're not ready to return right now, they might be ready to return later or be part of the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine and be part of the future of Ukraine. And we have now so many Ukrainians with the knowledge of the EU member states, and they can use that. And we have all these European companies that are investing in Ukraine that need the knowledge of Ukrainian and their cultural and language skills for their investments. So to building the bridges closer and closer with the Ukrainians is part of my mission. I can come deeper into that later on. And to answer your questions about, the Council proposed a prolongation of the temporary protection until March 27. And that will mean 5 years of temporary protection. And it's clear that temporary protection cannot be forever. And the legislation is not fit for a very long time, I should say. So that's why it's important that the recommendations were adopted at the same time, that member states now need to facilitate the transition out of temporary protection into another legal ground for staying in the member states, and to accelerate the integration process, the language uptaking, and all that. So that is important. But we also, as I mentioned, need to have this close link and work very close together with Ukraine and Ukrainian government, but also with international organizations like ICMPD and others, to how we can facilitate to building this human bridge with Ukraine that we will need in the future. And it's so important for Ukraine's future that more people need to be able to invest and come and be part of the recovery. So recommendations, of course, are only recommendations, but I don't think it will be actually possible with any legislation here. So my role is to facilitate that the implementation of these recommendations will have a European common approach, and to help facilitate the implementations both with the transition and with setting up of the voluntary return and recovery programs for those that are ready to already return to Ukraine.
Thank you very much. I want to come back to that at a later stage and dive deeper. I would like to explore some ideas with you. But it's very interesting what you said about the change in the narrative and change in the approach, moving away from temporary protection. Of course, in March 2027, we will have 5 years of temporary protection. And the name is, as the name says, it's temporary. And now we're looking into a discourse, an approach that looks towards the recovery and future of Ukraine. I would be interested to also understand from you, Ms. Betsa, once again, welcome, how this resonates with you in Ukraine. But also, before you start, could you perhaps tell us how the current situation in Ukraine is, and of course in Kyiv as well?
Good afternoon from Unbreakable Kiev. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to address this audience, and great to be on the same panel with the EU Special Envoy, Mrs. Johansson. Thank you so much. And of course, huge thanks to ICMPD for organizing this important event. Indeed, the situation in Ukraine is not easy. Russia keeps on attacking Ukrainians, targeting civilian infrastructure, energy objects, trying to intimidate Ukrainians to force them to flee their own country. But again, you know, it's again another miscalculation of Russia. Russia miscalculated in 2014 when it started its aggression against Ukraine. It miscalculated gravely in 2022 when it started its full-scale invasion. And it miscalculates now. Ukraine will not surrender. Ukrainians will fight because this is our home, this is our country, this is our family. We have only one country and one family to defend. And I'm fully concur with what Mrs. Johansson said. This is an existential fight, not only a fight between Ukraine or Russia, it's about Russia's imperialist and chauvinistic ambitions trying to conquer other states, to violate international borders, to violate sovereignty and territorial integrity. It's about using the aggression as a tool of statecraft in international relations. And Ukraine is absolutely, aware that it's not only about Ukraine's sovereignty or territorial integrity. Russia's hybrid attacks on Europe. We've seen the drone attacks on different cities and countries in Europe. We've seen other hybrid elements of warfare waged by Russia against the democratic society. This is a global war. It's not a Ukraine-Russia war. It's not a regional war. This is a hybrid warfare that Russia has waged against the entire democratic society. And it wants to conquer Ukraine, it wants to revive the Soviet Union, and it wants to have a buffer zone, Ukraine as a buffer zone between Russia and the West. And we would not let it happen because Ukraine is a sovereign country. And this is about the principles of UN Charter, about the core principles of every state, the issue of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And that's why, of course, this night was difficult. Russia again attacked many cities, and especially Chernihiv and Sumy. The city of Chernihiv was left totally in blackout, without energy and without water. But as our president, Volodymyr Zelensky, stated a few years ago, without you, without Russia, this is important. Let it be without water, but without Russia, this is the critical issue. We are in an independent country. We're fighting for our freedom. We do want the war to end. Ukraine is not an obstacle to peace. Russia needs to be forced to negotiations and to ceasing its aggression. Ukraine needs more air defense. Ukrainians need more military aid to protect our cities, to defend our country, to close the skies, to save our children. Ukraine needs more assistance, humanitarian, political, financial assistance, especially in terms of energy assistance in the run-up to winter. It's already pretty cold in Kiev. We don't have heating. It's pretty chilling, and attacks continue because Russia's goal hasn't changed: to destroy Ukraine as a country and to destroy Ukrainians as a nation. So yes, we need more support, military, political, humanitarian-wise, energy facilities, but of course we need support in terms of supporting Ukrainians who are displaced all over the globe because of the Russian aggression. And we are very much grateful to all the countries who support Ukrainians, to the EU for granting temporary protection, for extending it till March 2027. We definitely understand that any protection is temporary. For us, it is important that Ukraine as a country keeps connection with Ukrainians abroad. We definitely need to strengthen this connection and ties with the Ukrainians through different means: education, culture, economic recovery, reconstruction. We understand that the first and foremost, it is a consular services provided to Ukrainians, and we are grateful to ICMPD supporting consular services in different countries. It's about, of course, granting basic help and assistance abroad. But of course, in a longer-term perspective, we do want Ukrainians to come back. Of course, we talk about voluntary return, but for us, this is critical because these are millions of Ukrainians. We definitely do not want them to stay abroad. Ukrainians are part of our nation. They need to recover and to reconstruct Ukraine, and we definitely, in a longer-term perspective, look into their return. But of course, when the security situation and circumstances allow this, so far we understand that it's very difficult to speak about return of Ukrainians when Russia, as a terrorist state, keeps on attacking Ukraine on a daily basis.
Thank you very much. I want to follow up on that. Approximately 4.3 million Ukrainians are currently beneficiaries of temporary protection in Europe. But of course, there are also other numbers, more Ukrainians who have moved, residing now there for work, education or family reasons. There is, of course, a very strong Ukrainian diaspora community. It's a very vibrant one. As ICMPD, we also work with the Ukrainian diaspora in the EU. But I would like to understand from you more, what is your mid to long-term strategy when it comes to pertaining that unity with the global Ukrainian community, but especially the one in Europe? And at the same time, what is your government's approach? Many of us in the room are familiar with the concept of these unity hubs. What is your government's approach to maintaining ties with the Ukrainians abroad, possibly through the establishment of unity hubs? Does your ministry play a role in that context?
Yes, thank you so much. Indeed, we have 4.3 million Ukrainians who are enjoying temporary protection in Europe now. But of course, we have approximately 7 million Ukrainians in general being displaced all over the globe. But also, roughly, we have at least maybe 15 up to 20 million ethnic Ukrainians all over the globe, meaning Ukrainian diaspora, which had different wages of immigration throughout the past centuries. So definitely Ukrainian community is vibrant, big. These are separate groups. The Ukrainians who are part of our diaspora and have citizenship of other countries, of course, they're also part of our nation, and we definitely are working with them. But at the same time, their needs are totally different from those who were fleeing from the war. So obviously, these are two different groups of our citizens or our ethnic Ukrainians staying abroad. But for us as a state, they are all Ukrainians. And we want to create a common global Ukrainian space where each Ukrainian, regardless of the territory, citizenship, and by the way, Ukraine introduced multiple citizenship law just recently, and we're trying to implement it right now, which is also one of the instruments, quite efficient instruments, to keep the ties with the Ukrainians, with the state of Ukraine. So yes, we want to create a common global Ukrainian space where each and every Ukrainian in every region of the world could feel connected to Ukraine through culture, education, economic possibilities, investments into Ukraine. Definitely, we are speaking first and foremost about strengthening identity of Ukrainians, because assimilation happens very quickly, and we do not want to lose Ukrainians. We have lots of Ukrainian children. We have Ukrainian youth, students. Their role in the recovery of Ukraine, in the future of Ukraine, is extremely important. You know, on one hand, Russia kills our best people on the front. On the other hand, our best people, our youth, has left to study for security reasons. So definitely we need to keep ties with Ukrainian youth being abroad, and we're thinking about different educational, cultural issues, the programs, how to attract them, if not physically to return, how to intellectually return to Ukraine, to support Ukraine in advocacy, in recovery, in helping rebuilding Ukraine. This is extremely important. And the conference on recovery in Rome was very, very, very important. A role of human capital is extremely essential for Ukraine, and definitely this is very high on the agenda also for the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, for the entire government. Indeed, we are planning to establish unity hubs in different countries. There are a number of countries already negotiated where we signed the agreements. I hope that December, beginning of next year, they will be functional. They're not trying to substitute diplomatic or consular institutions. They're separate hubs, but these are the hubs where Ukrainians could feel that they are connected with Ukraine through different educational, cultural programs. Also, language is important. For us, what is important that Ukrainian children, Ukrainian people continue to learn Ukrainian, study in Ukrainian. We definitely have a number of already schools present in different countries. For example, in 2022, we opened a first bilingual school, Ukrainian-Estonian school in Tallinn. In 2024, it was first bilingual school in Budapest. So we have also Ukrainian-Hungarian school, because this is important that through education, our children keep ties also with Ukraine, with educational system of Ukraine, but also, I mean, it's about also communicating with Ukraine on a daily basis. So yes, in a longer term perspective, this is definitely the issue of return is important for Ukraine, but also only we are speaking about voluntary return. Second, unity hubs will function, and we will open more. We are looking into different countries. We definitely think that we need to create conducive environment, Ukrainian space in different countries, so we keep connected. Third, of course, we definitely understand that Ukrainians play a key role in also resisting Russian aggression, in humanitarian aid, in supporting rehabilitation programs, in advocacy. How many Ukrainians made different campaigns around the globe in support of giving weapons to Ukraine, or F-16 to Ukraine, or air defense. So yes, there were different, very, very powerful advocacy instruments. So our Ukrainians abroad, especially those ones who are extremely active and try to help Ukraine, they are sort of citizens ambassadors, you know, so citizens ambassadors of Ukraine trying to bring just peace closer to Ukraine, because everyone is interested. All those Ukrainians with whom I spoke, they absolutely express their wish to return to Ukraine, because their fathers are here, their parents are here, their life was here. Of course, we understand that some people will say it's a free choice, but for us, it is important that we keep connection with Ukraine, with Ukrainians abroad, and definitely they are our asset. It's a very important asset that Ukraine has such a vibrant Ukrainian community.
Thank you. I want to follow up as regards return and recovery. I don't know if you see the room here, but we have a lot of representatives from both European EU member states, partner states, and of course we have the special envoy for Ukraine, Ms. Johansson, with us. And so, of course, there is an interest to hear from you what you would need the Ukrainian state and your ministry also, when we talk about a return and a recovery strategy approach, in terms of perhaps joint communication towards European citizens, but also preparations for return, practicalities that need to be put in place when, of course, the situation allows for it. So what would you like to say to your partners in the room?
Yes, absolutely. One of the top priorities for Ukraine is, of course, the recovery of Ukraine. And we're grateful to all the states, international entities, organizations, but also to private companies who help us rebuild Ukraine now. For many countries, it was a challenge because you cannot guarantee the security of investments while the war is going on, but it is an investment into our common security. Every road built, every house built, every building built, every hospital rebuilt, recovered. This is investment into our common security, not only Ukraine, but also European security. Because, of course, Russia's goal is far-reaching. It's not only about Ukraine. Of course, we understand that global Ukrainian community plays a key role in also recovery and reconstruction. For us, first and foremost, it was a great milestone that at the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Rome, we launched there was a launch of a global alliance for diaspora engagement in Ukraine's reconstruction. This is extremely important. We look into different programs, how to attract Ukrainians, what conditions to create economically to also bring our Ukrainian human capital to Ukraine, to the economy of Ukraine, and how to encourage them to directly contribute to the recovery of Ukraine. When Ukrainians will return, there should be certain conditions. First and foremost, security. Of course, security should be in place for the return. Second, there should be, of course, access to housing, access to education, access to work. So we understand that these are the pillars that we need to create for Ukrainians also to create. First and foremost, there should be security in place, which is not the case. When we speak about security, it's not only about after the victory of Ukraine, it's also when we have enough air defense, when we have humanitarian demining, we see how many Ukrainians within the country do return, internally displaced persons do return to their cities when they know that their cities are better protected in terms of air defense, when the villages or cities are demined. So this is also important. So definitely there are certain conditions for the return in terms of objective reality. But for us, it is important that Ukrainians do contribute to the recovery through different programs, investments, first and foremost, and we try to see what programs we, together with European partners, could create to make them be involved more actively in the recovery of Ukraine.
Thank you. I would like to now bring you back in, Ms. Johansson. We've heard about Ukraine priorities, especially in relation to return and recovery. So looking at those, what do you think, how can the EU and the EU member states help to align these priorities with their own, especially with the transitioning planning? Do you share the state of play in Ukraine as well as the mentioned support needs?
Yes, I very much share what we hear from the Deputy Minister, and I must say that I think this is really the thing. All Ukrainians matter. They are important for Ukraine. Whether they stay in the country where they are now, but they are still important and they might come back later, or otherwise they will be important in another way for Ukraine. So I think for us as the EU, we need to support and facilitate these links between Ukraine and the Ukrainians, and this is an act of solidarity that we can do towards Ukraine. And just also to say a bit on my role as I am appointed under Commissioner Magnus Brunner, who is the Commissioner for Home Affairs, because he's responsible for the Temporary Protection Directive. But actually I work very close with Commissioner Marta Kos, who is responsible for enlargement and for the support to Ukraine. And I think this is the link that we really need to have, how we transition out of the temporary protection, and that we do that in a way that is in line with the long-term support for the future of Ukraine. And coming back to that, so member states usually, most of these people in the room know that, member states usually support a person that will return after a period in a member state with some financial support. When it comes to Ukrainians that are ready to return now or in the close future, we will recommend member states not to do that. Instead, to use the financial support for the local community, to support the local school, to support the building of houses, to support in a way that will not only benefit the returnees, but also all those that are already have stayed all the time in Ukraine, and the internally displaced people that are also in Ukraine, so that we should keep the cohesion in the Ukrainian society, because it's a country at war, as we know. So there are so many needs. So member states should support the returns, but it should also support recovery into the local community. So there should not be an individual support, it should be support to the local community where the returnees are returning to. And if you allow me, I think there's one area here that we have not discussed enough, and that is the involvement of the business sector. We all know that the reconstruction of Ukraine will not only be paid by taxpayers' money. We will need a lot from the business sector for the reconstruction. We already have so many European companies that are already active in Ukraine, that are investing in Ukraine. I learned today that from Austria, there are already 200 Austrian companies active in Ukraine, and it's the same situation in all member states. And I think that we should use and invite these business sectors, these companies, to be part of these personal links, because they need people that know the Ukrainian language, that know the Ukrainian culture, to work for them here and in Ukraine. And we should support them to employ Ukrainians here and maybe bring them back to Ukraine, but also, of course, employing the Ukrainians in Ukraine. And that might also include reskilling and upskilling, because people need to shift into new jobs, as we know, and some people, for example, veterans, might need to shift to another job than the one they had before. So this will be an important role that this business sector and the companies can play. And I would like to say also that for the Unity Hubs, I think also we should involve companies and business sector into the Unity Hubs. I know, for example, that many Ukrainians that are here say, of course, security is an obstacle of returning, but also many of them say, but I don't have a job anymore in Ukraine. So we should also help them, because there are a lot of vacancies. There's a lack of workforce, but we should help to match that into the right vacancies, and also help with upskilling if that is necessary. So I think that building these links, we should also involve the business sector.
Thank you. We've discussed this in on another occasion, but of course we're going to be looking into also as ICMPD, where we operate the Ukrainian consultation centers, explore the engagement with the private sector. This was a discussion we had earlier today, and of course also look forward to working closely with the Unity Hubs. But Ms. Betsa, I just want to come to you on that point, because you did mention also engagement with the private business, private companies. Is there anything you want to elaborate more on that? Also, of course, it does require, given also the return context, a whole of government approach, a broader approach to connect returns and recovery efforts, and then engage also with the private sector. Do you have any plans and programs in that regard?
Indeed, it's extremely important that not only governments or international organizations, but also the business and private sector do help Ukraine. And my plea and urge to all countries, member states present in the European Union would be, please do stand with Ukraine till victory. This is a pivotal moment. It's a critical juncture right now. Russia is pressing more. We need to be united at the level of states, governments, at the level of business, at the level of human capital. We need to be united in the face of this aggression. We need to show Russia that we will win, that the time is on our side. And definitely, our plea to business would be do support all recovery programs that are being done in Ukraine. Because again, this is a security issue. This is not so much economic or financial. This is a security issue for Ukraine and for European security. Second, in terms of business supporting Unity Hubs, absolutely, we are absolutely open. This is important that we need to create the Ukrainian global space where every Ukrainian feels connected to Ukraine, could transfer skills, expertise, because all Ukrainians abroad, they have unique expertise right now. Someone is studying abroad, someone is working abroad, and they can contribute to the recovery of Ukraine with the transfer expertise, knowledge, resources. There are many ways. Third, of course, we are open to discuss different EU programs also, which could contribute us to engage Ukrainians abroad, the business, to the recovery of Ukraine, because that's why the Global Alliance of the Diaspora Engagement was launched by our Ministry of National Unity at the Rome Recovery Conference. This is important because this is a platform to coordinate, to mobilize the resources, the businesses, and to establish effective mechanism how to do that. Because many countries, many people want to support Ukraine, but then the issue comes how to effectively establish the mechanism, the procedures to participate in the recovery. And I think there is plenty of work to be done, and we need to work together. But of course, our main plea would be that please do support Ukraine till victory. This is extremely important, and we definitely think that our people also support your countries, your economies, but also your societies. It is extremely important. But for us, of course, these are our people, and we definitely want them back.
Thank you. One more question to you, Ms. Johansson, and that is in your role as a special envoy for Ukraine and Ukrainians, what are your coming priorities to put the Council recommendations on the transition away from temporary protection for displaced persons into action? And where do you see and the possibility for you to coordinate both the approach to remain as well as, of course, the return, the approach towards return?
Yes, of course, there's a lot of opportunities and a need to coordinate a lot of things. But I will focus, these are the two different strands. One is to support and help the member states with a transition from temporary protection into a more appropriate legal residence permit in the member states, and align with that also with integration. And of course, that will be done in different ways in different member states, but I should say in almost all member states, they need to build a legal bridge from temporary protection into another national scheme. And then I can help also with the coordination, with the benchmarking a bit between member states, how well developed they are on this. The second part is to help to build the bridge together with Ukrainians. And this is the unit hubs come in, here where the business sector come in, here's where all the investments come in, and here is also where we need to support that Ukrainians can keep a good and strong links with the Ukrainian identity, with the Ukrainian state, and to be part of the Ukrainian future. And just to say, I mean, when I discuss now with ministers and about what kind of shift they might need to do this ordinary transition into a national legal status, how they should support those that are ready to return already now with the recovery programs and so on. They see, oh, but it's so difficult and we have all this, we have to do that and that. And I just want to say, look at the Ukrainians. They are not only excellent military fighters, they are so brave, they are so innovative, they are so creative, they are so action-oriented. Can we learn a bit from that and help to solve the situation that we are in right now with the 4.5 million Ukrainians that we have in our member states? This is a good way that we can support Ukraine, and we should really don't miss that opportunity.
Very good, two messages from both Deputy Minister Betsa and from you, Ms. Johansson. Now it's time to take questions from the audience. We still have roughly 7 minutes, so I'm happy to take 2-3 questions. Please raise your hand and also tell us your name, and I would kindly ask you to also keep your interventions short. I do not necessarily see any hands raised. Or yes? We've covered everything, it seems. Yes, one over there, thank you.
Thank you. Vidnavotny from the Martin Center. I'd like to ask Ms. Johansson, when the Council recommended the recommendations to phase out of temporary protection, what was the immediate impetus to do that? Why not prolong temporary protection for another 5 years, let's say?
So, the temporary protection is by definition temporary, so you can see if you go into the legislation, it's not meant to be for a very long time, and you can see it's not really fit for that purpose. There could be, of course, be a situation where you need to have give protection to people that newly flee from Ukraine. But I can see no need for people that already been here for 5 years, and that's the majority, to continue being treated like refugees that need immediate protection. What they need is a job, a proper housing, childcare, language courses, access to education, being part of society, contribute to the host society, and of course also contribute to the Ukrainian society. And those that are vulnerable, because some of them are, that they're old or they are sick or they are with disabilities, they need, of course, the same kind of support that other citizens need. There should not be a specific, temporary support for these groups. If they've been here for 5 years, they should be part of the society. So this is how I see it, and I think I share that with most of the member states, and I think I share that also with the Ukrainian government, that this is a way, of course, hopefully not, that we will see more people, need to flee out of Ukraine because of what happens in the war. But of course, if that happens, we have to deal with that. But we should not treat those that are here now like, temporary refugees. They should be part of society, and they should have a job, and they should be integrated, and their kids should go to school and to have childcare and so on.
Thank you very much. Well, I see 1 and 2 more hands raised. I'll take them as well. I was planning to close, but happy to, of course, hear the questions.
Yeah, hello. I just would like to follow up. My name is Martin Wagner from ICMPD. I would just like to follow up what you just said, because for transition out of temporary protection, there are limited options there, and they are all more or less connected with work. And you just mentioned the vulnerable among this group, and we always had in discussions that we had with member states that this is the crucial group where it is difficult to find a transition. What are the plans in this direction to find possibilities to transit actually out of temporary protection, because they will not find a residence permit in one or the other that are established in member states?
No. So that's why member states need to set up new schemes or new legislation for these groups, and they all understand that this is necessary. For example, for the vulnerable groups, in most member states, it will be necessary to do some special legislation for them, so that they can stay and get the proper support. That's what's in the recommendation, and I think all member states fully agree and understand that this needs to be done. It has to be done, of course, in a way that fits into the national legislation. So that could be a bit different from one member state to another, but it's necessary. And what my message to the ministers is, if you talk about legislation, March 27 is tomorrow. So you have to start preparing for that right now. And some are already well prepared. For example, I was in Warsaw 3 weeks ago, and they are well prepared. They will have an easy app that will be accessible, I think, from January, where Ukrainians under the temporary protection, after 12 months on temporary protection, they could, via the app, apply for a temporary stay in Poland. And then after that, they have to go and show up themselves physically that they are actually there. But they are setting up, they are using a way to, they are adjusting a bit so that it will be easy for those that are on temporary protection to transit into a new and better, more appropriate legal stay. And if Poland can do that with 1 million Ukrainians under the temporary protection, I think that other member states could do not exactly the same way. Of course, they would like to do it in their way, but it's absolutely necessary, and I think almost none of the member states have all the legislation in place already, so that's why they need to start preparing for that now. Another challenge is that when you transit into another national legal status, there usually has to be an individual assessment. And you cannot, process all these millions of application at the same time. You have to start now. Start with easy cases, yes, but start with to assess them and to have more and more into to new schemes. I think this is absolutely necessary, and we will start follow this from the EU Commission side to see, the numbers on temporary protection and the numbers that are being transiting over to other legal statuses.
Thank you. We're running absolutely over time, so very short, yes, please.
Thank you very much. Jean-Christophe Dumont from the OECD, and I have a short question for Deputy Minister Betsa. Very nice to see you again. As you said, there are a lot of Ukrainians all over the world, and not only in Europe. A large number of them are in the United States, in Canada, some in Israel. What do you think should be the specific approach to continue connecting with this large Ukrainian community and maybe also foster a return from these settlement countries?
Thank you so much. Great to see you. And indeed, we have a large community in USA, Canada, Australia, in different countries. For us, we're working with each country individually, but it is, of course, if we speak about the issue of ties between the state of Ukraine and Ukrainians, our main connections are done by the embassies and consulates with all the Ukrainians present in those countries. And we are working with them in terms of their culture, their consular protection, their education, also their language, whenever it is necessary. But of course, for us, it is important to create different programs where Ukrainians also, Ukrainian children in particular, do learn Ukrainian language and do not forget it. In terms of the return of the Ukrainians, we're also working with each and every country individually, but so far it is not on the agenda of the immediate return because of the security issues. But we welcome any long-term planning, like the EU and the issue of discussions we're having today in terms of transition and what we do after March 27. This is extremely important as well because, of course, we understand that Ukrainians are also part of your society now.
Perfect. Thank you very much for joining me today here in person and also online, Ms. Betsa and Ms. Johansson. And thank you very much for this rich conversation. We've come to the end, and also many thanks for the audience for your attention. And please join me for a warm applause to thank our two speakers.